Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the Granite Fang player character ownership infrastructure, specifically for Dungeons & Dragons player characters. And today we're going to talk about the Dungeon Master and non-player characters. So what is the infrastructure for non-player characters to be owned by a Dungeon Master? All right, so why did I save this till last? Well, here's the thing. Almost every single thing that applies to player characters being owned by a Dragon Master, specifically the Dungeons & Dragons player who created them, is apropos for non-player characters. So everything that applies for player character owner infrastructure applies to non-player characters except the following delta. So I'm going to give you the delta. So Providence, done exactly the same way, okay? Statuses, exactly the same. Active, ended, transferred, okay? Now, and then let's talk about transfer. It's exactly the same. You can a non-player character can be transferred from a dungeon master to another dungeon master, or listen carefully, a non-player character can be transferred to a player a dragon master, a Dungeons & Dragons player, and then once it is received, and then once it's received, that can become a player character for that dragon master. Okay. But what are the differences? Well, there are some differences. So one, non-player characters are not like player characters in that they're not always named. Good dungeon masters often have non-named non-player characters. So you might have the boisterous innkeeper, right? You may never name them in your dungeon master may never name them in their campaign, right? Can a dungeon master own a non-named non-player character? No, they may not. All ownership requires a name for the non-player character. Non-named NPCs are never owned by the dungeon master. Only a named non-player character. What else and actually, when does a dungeon master own an NPC? All right, so here you go. First of all, they have to have, they do not need a non-player character. They do not need a character sheet to own an NPC. All they need, right, is name, species, class, and not even a background. And that's it. And that note, written on a physical piece of paper in ink, starts the process. So first of all, they have to write down the name, right? They then need to specify the species and specify the class. That's it. That's all that's needed to own an NPC, except for the following thing. They then need to have that non-player character interact in one of the three columns of Dungeons & Dragons. The three pillars of Dungeons & Dragons are combat, interaction, exploration. That non-player character must engage in combat with a player character, they must interact with a player character, or they must explore with a player character. If they do not do that, and they must do that in a physical table with physical books session, right? So the dungeon master, in order to own a non-player character, must have that named, written down non-player character interact in one of the three D&D pillars, and that is exploration, interaction, combat. And once they've done that in a single session, right, with an actual Dragon Master, an actual Dungeons & Dragons player, they then own that non-player character. All the rest is the same, right? All ownership aspects that apply to player characters apply to non-player characters, right? And with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for going on this extensive journey into the Granite Fang player character and non-player character ownership infrastructure. And I believe this is useful because we can now use this specifically to establish ownership for player characters and non-player characters. We have not had a clear infrastructure for ownership for player characters and non-player characters in 50 years, and this is something that we as the D&D community can do in the second 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons, is set this in place and bless both players, Dragon Masters, and the runners, Dungeon Masters, in a really unique way. And I think this will be something really unique, something special, and something highly useful in the second 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons. I hope you feel the same way. I really want to thank you for going on this long journey with me, of having to understand this through a playlist. Many thanks for joining me on this journey, and I am really eager to hear what you think about this proposed player character infrastructure. Thank you very much once again. Please consider liking, and as always, everything you've just heard is my humble opinion, nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.